Have you ever wondered where Quentin Tarantino was inspired to incorporate his signature Mexican standoff in his films?
Point the gun at me! There you go.
Or where Christopher Nolan learned how to use film score to shape pacing, emotional climax, and even narrative elements in his stories? The answer is in Sergio Leone, the father of spaghetti westerns. Leone was essentially born into cinema, with his father being an Italian pioneer in filmmaking and his mother an actress. Sergio grew up with movies and was naturally drawn to them. He was especially interested in the stories that America produced, specifically stories of the Wild West.
Ringo! It's them vaqueros. They've run away.
Yeah, with the spare horses.
He was fascinated by the old lifestyle of early Americans and wanted to preserve those memories. Growing up Italian, he saw America as a foreign land, with wild characters who chased the American dream. Until he saw what modern-day Americans were like. In my childhood, America was like a religion. Then, real-life Americans abruptly entered my life, in jeeps, and upset all my dreams. I found them very energetic, but also very deceptive. They were no longer the Americans of the West. They were soldiers like any others, materialists, possessive, keen on pleasures and earthly goods. This explains why Leone's films told stories of Americans, but in the olden days. He wanted to preserve the old American lifestyle because he thought it was more interesting than modern-day America. He was both fascinated and terrified of the land out west, which is something he used to fuel his storytelling. Before Leone was able to tell epic stories of the West, however, he started working behind the scenes of films such as Quo Vadis, Ben-Hur, and The Last Days of Pompeii. Sword and sandal films were increasingly popular at this time, especially in Italy. His knowledge on set made him valuable for large epics such as these, and he even had the opportunity to assist in directing. After a decade of building his reputation in the industry, Sergio was ready to tell his own stories. He started with the film that popularized the spaghetti western genre, A Fistful of Dollars. Leone decided to film an American Western in Italy because it was cheaper, and it's all he really knew working on historical epics that were filmed in Europe anyway. Leone initially wanted Henry Fonda as the man with no name since that was his favorite actor growing up, but he was too expensive for the film's limited budget. After some searching, they found a small-time actor who was known for his role in the series, Rawhide. This was Clint Eastwood.
Well, I've never had a love to call my own. A poor drover's life is always alone.
Eastwood was paid only $15,000 for A Fistful of Dollars, but considering the effect that this role had on his career, I'm sure he thinks it was more than worth it.
My mule don't like people laughing. It's the crazy idea you're laughing at him.
The film made about $15 million at the box office, and it launched the careers of Leone and Eastwood into immense success. This movie also began one of the greatest director-composer duos in film history, with Ennio Morricone. However, Sergio Leone and his team ran into a legal problem with the film. It was an unauthorized remake of the Japanese samurai film Yojimbo. The overall plot of a foreigner coming into a town and manipulating two rival gangs against each other for money was exactly the same. Even the characters were copied. Akira Kurosawa, the director and writer of Yojimbo, praised A Fistful of Dollars, but said it's his film. Ironically, Kurosawa ended up making more money from the lawsuit than he did from Yojimbo. With new eyes on him, Leone decided to make a sequel to A Fistful of Dollars called For a Few Dollars More. Clint Eastwood returned as the man with no name but this time was paid $50,000 instead of $15,000. Before shooting began, Leone had Ennio Morricone compose most of the film's score so that it could be played on set for the cast and crew to feel the emotional weight of key scenes. This was an unorthodox method in filmmaking, but Leone believed that music had the power to arouse certain emotions and shape the overall mood of his films. I've always said that my best dialogue and screenwriter is Ennio Morricone. Many future filmmakers would be inspired to incorporate music into their films in the manner that Leone did, insofar as it drives the story, emotion, and overall flow. Another famous Leone technique is his use of close-ups. Leone focused on his actors' faces because he wanted the audience to feel the emotions coming from the characters in his story. For maximum emotional impact, he usually paired close-ups with music. With the success of A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, Leone was able to close off the trilogy with the good, the bad, and the ugly. This film had a much bigger budget, with about $1 million to work with, and thus fully cemented and encapsulated Leone's style. The trilogy was released in America in 1967 and was extremely popular with audiences. Even though the films were already well known in Europe for some time, American distributors thought it would be risky to bring a foreign Western film with an unorthodox style, made by an Italian, that contained dubbed dialogue. It was a risk that United Artists were willing to take, and it paid off. Clint Eastwood became an international star, and Leone was a household name. With the proper reputation and experience, Leone wanted to create his dream movie. Before studios gave him the funding for that, however, they wanted him to make one more Western, since that's what he was known for. This is how Once Upon a Time in the West came to be.
Yeah, go on. Play harmonica. Play so you can't bullshit. Only watch those false notes.
Widely regarded as the greatest Western of all time, this further cemented Leone's legacy in the film world, and he finally got to work with his favorite childhood actor, Henry Fonda. However, Fonda was playing a villain, which the audience wasn't used to seeing. Leone decided to use this film as the first part in a brand new trilogy called the Once Upon a Time trilogy. The films in this trilogy, much like the Dollars trilogy, starring Clint Eastwood, were not narratively linked, and anyone can watch each of the films separately, without lacking any context from the previous film. The second movie in the trilogy was Duck, You Sucker, or A Fistful of Dynamite, or Once Upon a Time in the Revolution, depending on which title you want to use. The film experienced difficulty in attracting audiences, and distributors decided to change the name to be more appealing, but it still turned out to be a box office disappointment. However, Leone wasn't so concerned about this. What he really desired was to make his dream film and the final installment in the trilogy. He even turned down directing The Godfather so that he can focus on Once Upon a Time in America. This movie tells the story of childhood friends turned gangster and explores themes of friendship, love, and betrayal. With stars such as Robert De Niro and James Woods, and a $30 million budget, this was by far Leone's biggest and most ambitious project. It took 10 months to film and nearly a year for post-production. This wasn't only due to Leone's meticulous and perfectionist style, but also the disagreements between Leone and Warner Brothers about the theatrical cut. The studio thought the non-linear structure and runtime would be uninteresting and confusing to audiences, so they decided to make the film linear and cut it down by over an hour. Leone thought this completely ruined the film, and audiences agreed as the movie only brought in $5 million. What Leone thought was going to be his masterpiece was butchered by the studio. His amazing vision turned into a box office flop. He began working on a World War II film about the siege of Leningrad, but it never took flight as Leone's declining health caused his death in 1989. He never lived to see Once Upon a Time in America reaching viewers at home through Blu-ray. Only this time, Leone's final cut was released, and audiences praised the film as a masterpiece. Although Sergio Leone's career in film might have been cut short, he proved his place among the greats. Not only did he bring back a dying genre, but he reinvented it and gave it new life. Many successful films use Leone's storytelling methods and techniques today.
You know, that final bull ring scene in Good and the Bad and the Ugly, for me, is the finest moment of cinema. That is my favorite moment of cinema. And I think the thing that makes it that my favorite movie is the fact that you go through such a long journey to get to it. And then when you get to it, it just so delivers on the entire experience. As opposed to being exhausted, you're elated by the end of the film.
Sergio Leone made a lasting impact on film with his genius vision and revolutionary style. He's a filmmaker highly regarded as one of the best in the business, and it truly shows in his work, which is what makes him the father of spaghetti westerns.